Do you and your friends have a fandom that you love to talk about? Would you love to share your thoughts and ideas with potentially millions of listeners? What if I told you that there is just one app you could download to your cell phone where you and your friends could start, edit, and record a podcast and publish it to popular podcasting sites such as Apple Podcast and Spotify, plus many more? And with this podcast, what if I told you you had the potential to earn extra income? Would you be interested? Now, this app is called Anchor, and it is free from the Play Store or the App Store. Or you could download it from Anchor.fm. Anchor will distribute your podcast, and it has everything you need to get started. So what are you waiting for? Get started today with Anchor. Welcome to Sci-Fi Graveyard, where we take a look at old and new sci-fi TV shows and movies. We'll learn a little bit about the show or movie and give our first impressions and how we felt after seeing the show. Tonight, Jeremy and Josh join me to talk about 80s sci-fi TV show Automan. I thought I would start off with a little bit of history about the show, and then we could talk about what we thought before going into it and what we thought after. And I don't think this is going to be as long as our other podcasts, so I don't think there's too much to say really, because it just wasn't a very long running show. But I thought it was an interesting show. I like it, and so just going to give you some little tidbits about Automan. Automan was a 1980 sci-fi cop show that aired from December 15th of 1983 through April 2nd of 1984. The show filmed 13 episodes, however, they only aired 12 of those on ABC. The show was created by Knight Rider and Battlestar Galactica creator Glenn Larson, and was also produced by Donald Kushner, who is also one of the producers of Tron. If you look at the show, you can see that this show is heavily inspired by Tron, and even Glenn Larson has said that in interviews. The show follows police computer lab officer Walter Nebaker, played by Desi Arnaz Jr., who is the son of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and the holographic superhero Automan, played by Chuck Wagner. Automan gets his name for being the world's first completely automated man. This is stated in the first episode, and actually they state this in every episode at the beginning after the theme song. Each episode begins with a brief introduction, like I just said. Automan has a sidekick named Cursor, and Cursor is the one who actually makes everything that Automan needs, from the autocar, the autocopter, or the autoplane, in various outfits for him to wear to blend in and look like a normal human. Even in one episode, Cursor makes an electric guitar for Automan so he can rock out with a band. One of the reasons the show was canceled was because it was never really an instant hit. However, the main reason it was canceled, and this was stated in an interview that I found on YouTube, and it said that each episode of this show cost over $1 million to produce, and that was a very rare cost for a show at that time, very expensive cost. Another little bit of trivia is Chuck Wagner had to wear 4-inch heels to make Automan appear larger, even though Chuck Wagner himself was already 6 feet 5 inches tall. So they made him almost 7 feet tall with the heels.
Good Lord.
Yeah, the autocar was a customized Lamborghini Countach, and according to, I believe it was Chuck that said this in the documentary. I got some stuff from Wikipedia, some stuff from this documentary that I found. However, Desi Arnaz and Chuck Wagner were not allowed to drive the car. Mostly, you would only see them getting in and out, and stunt drivers had to actually drive the car. Another interesting tidbit about Automan is, even though he's technically supposed to be a fully holographic character, no computer animation was used to create any of the effects for Automan. The effects were all traditional animation and editing techniques, much like the movie Tron is about a cyber world, which none of the effects were really CGI. Another really quick tidbit about Automan is this is shown in the pilot, which I think you both watched. Automan's likeness is a mixture of celebrities that Walter entered into his computer. The celebrities are Paul Newman, Lee Majors, Tom Selleck, Burt Reynolds, Richard Burton, and Christopher Reeve. Interesting note, I got this bit of trivia from IMDb, and they actually had Christopher Reeve's name spelled wrong, so I had to submit a correction for that, and they approved it, so I was happy. Let's see.
And also at the same time, I got to point this out that if anybody watched House of a Thousand Corpses, that in the first episode,
Sid Haig
was in it. Yeah.
Who was in it?
Captain Spaulding or Sid Haig, that was in most of the House of a Thousand Corpses, Rob Zombie's movies. He was the guy that was starting a fight with I forgot the main character's name.
Walter and the girl that was there.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the girl from the show, Heather McNair?
Yeah.
Roxanne Caldwell?
Yeah.
Another interesting tidbit, if you watch the show and you watch more episodes, Cursor has a thing for blondes, and there's actually a girl in the credits where you see him looking like he's kind of staring at her boobs. That girl was only in one episode. She was in the episode that was kind of like a Staying Alive Saturday Night Fever type of episode. I think this is also the episode where he gets the electric guitar. But they go to a dance club, and everything takes place. Actually, no, I take that back. That wasn't the electric guitar episode. This was actually the second episode of the season. He goes to a dance club, and he's wearing something very John Travolta, very much like John Travolta did.
Yeah, the white suit.
And yeah, the white suit and the girl at the bar, because that's all at a casino, I do believe. And she's in the opening credits of every episode, but she's only in that episode. Also, the stunt dancer for Chuck Wagner, who is also an accomplished dancer in his own right, he was actually in Staying Alive, I believe it was. And then one of the girls in the other episode I watched, which was about the female rock band, she was actually one of the girls in the Thriller video with Michael Jackson. So a little bit of interesting tidbit there. So I thought we'd talk about what we liked about the show, or not what we liked about the show, but what our first impressions was, because I know I sent you all kind of the introduction part of the credits where they talk about who Automan is and stuff like that, just to kind of so you could all get something in your head what you might like about the show. And then, after you watch it, what you felt. So I don't know since I know as the host, I should probably go first, but I'll let either one of you start and tell me what your first impressions were.
Well, for mine, right away, I felt like this was definitely a bit out of at least the Automan guy. I was definitely getting the Tron vibes anyway, just because everything looked the same. But it felt like some of it kind of gave me the vibes of Incredible Hulk for some reason. When I was watching it, probably because they kind of go by the same kind of formula, it seems like, during most of the episodes or whatever.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Because it's very procedural, just like a 70s or 80s superhero show. Yeah. I mentioned something similar, not something similar, in what I think about the show after watching it. And I think it plays along kind of like what you're saying there. But go on.
But most of I thought it was cool, but I could already tell right away that money had something to do with how they canceled it. Because especially I think that when Tron came out, I think they were saying that it was very high budget for that movie too at the time, because the effects and stuff like that was rather new at the time. And especially the premise, how it was mostly computer based and stuff, how he's a hologram and all that stuff. It felt it's felt like it was kind of early on, for something that could have been if they would have done that now or 10 years ago or something, it probably wouldn't have been as weird of a thing. But knowing that it came out when it did, a lot of people probably didn't watch it just because they were what the hell is this, a computer doing all this shit?
And it's funny you mentioned that, because Chuck Wagner in an interview actually said something along those lines. Had it been done today, well, at least at the time of the interview was from 2012. He's like, if someone had done it with today, it'd probably be a lot cheaper and probably would have gone over a lot better, just because of how things have progressed with special effects. The show wouldn't have been as expensive
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Jeremy, what was your first impressions of Automan before you hunkered down and watched how much of it you
Oh, I
watched?
only watched the first episode. I, I,
So, what would you think? What was your thought process before you went in? Did you watch the trailer that I sent
well,
before the
yeah, and I
episodes?
could tell it was probably going to be pretty cheesy, and that's basically what I got from it in the first episode that I watched. Um, like, you guys probably saw I was sending text messages early on today, or about the fact that he was Automatic Man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. Because he could do anything.
he pretty much had no like his only real weaknesses was running out of power. So like, and that's why a lot of the show took place at night. You notice that first episode, pretty much the whole episode
Yeah, and
was
he
at
had to
night.
use the
There's
outlet to charge up when he couldn't get through
yeah.
the walls anymore. Uh,
Another reason the show was filmed predominantly at night was because they didn't know how to light his suit in the daytime to make it look good back in 1983. So that's why a lot of the shots are at night too. They used special tape on his suit, and they reflected light
Oh,
off
so
of
it was
it.
actually a legit
Very
suit
in,
that they had him wear, and then they just added the effects afterwards.
yeah, they added the
well,
effects
it's
afterwards
the
and stuff
same
like that.
fabric that was used for like the Kryptonian costumes in Superman. If you remember.
yeah, it's something
Yeah.
very reflective. Yeah, he had very reflective tape, and so that's where the blue light was
Yeah.
light they were reflecting
And
off
there's
of him.
certain
He
points
said this.
in there where it felt like it was like super, super bright when it didn't need to be as bright as it was.
It got a little bright, and I'll be honest with my first impressions of the show. I actually can't remember how I first heard of this show because I had heard of this show like many, 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 many years ago. Like it's been a long time since I've heard of this show, and I had the kind of same thoughts as Jeremy. I'm like, this show's probably cheesy as hell. It takes place in the '80s for one, when computers could do anything and everything, and they made shows about computers doing everything and anything. Do y'all remember the movie Daryl about the android boy and he steals an SR-71? That was in the early '80s. Computers could do anything, and so I was thinking that this is going to be like something cheesy, like very tongue in cheek. Um, I think it played into a lot of how things were in the early '80s because if you look at shows like a Knight Rider, another Glenn Larson show, and stuff like that, same setup like the Incredible Hulk that you mentioned earlier, Josh. My first impression was I just had to see this show because I thought it was going to be something super cheesy, and I had to check it out, especially hearing it was by Glenn Larson. And I can't remember where I first heard about it's been probably a good decade since I first heard of this show.
And this show was
And
super weird.
But I can also tell you one thing, and I was mentioning it to the wife, was that it was like what it reminded me of is, how most superhero or comic books, right, have the person as their alter ego or whatever in a normal job, and then they're a superhero outside of that. This kind of reminded me of almost the opposite, where there was Walter had the job as the cop, but he created a superhero alter ego, but it wasn't him necessarily. So it was a computer programmed superhero that he made. So it was a little bit different, but it kind of reminded me of just any normal, because like Spider-Man, for instance, he was a photographer, right? But no one knew he was Spider-Man at night. But right now they're setting this up as Walter is a cop, but nobody knows about this Automan guy that is essentially can be combined with him, right? So it's
I thought that was super weird.
One of
I
his
don't know how,
superpowers.
I don't remember
That
them even introducing like how he would just go inside of Automan, I guess, at one point.
that was something that was really weird that I thought, because it's like you're stepping inside of a hologram that doesn't make you bulletproof, but all of a sudden Automan makes him bulletproof. He can walk through walls when he's inside Automan. I thought that was
Well, the
really
whole
weird.
premise of him being
Um,
inside of him didn't
it's
really make sense. It was like,
it,
hey, he's a
it no it
hologram. I'm
it
just gonna sit
it,
over here and just just make up like, oh, this I'm
the
a hologram, but he could become a hologram too. It's fine.
it's kind of like kind of what Jeremy was saying. It's like, well, like Automan is everything Walter wished he could be, and so he had to live vicariously through this holographic superhero and stuff like that. But like the whole walking through walls and being bulletproof when he was an Automan, I totally didn't get. Um, the tangibility of holograms, because given enough power, so basically the auto car and Automan could, if he has tactile touch, he's also created like force fields in some manner, but they don't. It's all light. Cursor was kind of a perv. I think I mentioned that at the beginning, but I just thought it was going to be a really cheesy show and not serious sci-fi like Star Trek: The Next Generation would be later on, or anything along those lines. I thought it was going to be tongue in cheek, and and it was. So I do have to ask. Okay, so we talked about what you thought maybe going into it. After you've watched it and you've digested it, what do you think about the show overall? Like, I know y'all didn't watch every episode. I haven't seen every episode either, but I tried to provide enough stuff to give you a taste of it, because it's a procedural and it doesn't have like overarching story arcs, because a lot of shows were more episodic then and they didn't have that overreaching. They're all standalones. So, and obviously the show didn't run long enough to have, reoccurring characters and stuff like that, kind of like some other shows did. So, Josh, I'll start with you since you started last time. After watching what you watched, what did you think of the show
Well, honestly,
afterwards?
I didn't think it was super bad. Like, I mean, the whole name and like is just goofy as hell because it's just like Automan. What are you trying to imply? I thought it was like a dude that turned into a car.
Kind of like
But
Turbo
like
Team.
that's pretty much all I would be thinking about. And then when I watched it, I was like, oh, it's about a hologram. What? And that made sense why I'm like I didn't. That's like another thing that I can see why it got canceled was because it was just a confusing ass name. But I didn't think
I
like
got that.
because I used to watch a lot of like the old stuff like Dukes of Hazard and Starsky and Hutch and Incredible Hulk and stuff back in the day. So it felt of the time with all those shows. Like it had that type of vibe to it, but it just had this hologram thing for the main hero of the storyline. But like I didn't find it to be a bad show. I didn't find it to be a great show either. It was just a show.
All right, Jeremy, after watching the pilot, what did you think of the show?
Oh, like I said, it was extremely cheesy. I, but you know what? At the same time, I thought one of the coolest parts about the show was the car. Um, but I also, yeah,
The
the auto
Lamborghini?
car or whatever you want to call it. But I could tell you, and
Yeah, that's what it was called, Auto Car.
the interesting part to me was the 90-degree turns it would make,
Yeah.
where where it would just go into the
He
Hey,
goes,
but it only does
and
90
throw the guys
degree
to the
turns
make
in the
it that.
computer or whatever he said in the first
He
episode.
goes, you programmed me
yeah.
to make 90 turns. Some of the stuff was so ridiculous, but I think that was part of the show's charm. What else did you think about it?
Not much else, honestly. It would, I think, because I only watched one episode. That you know, I read that I guess he also posed as a government agent by the name of Otto J Man,
Yeah,
which,
yeah. There was at least one of the episodes I watched where he pretended he was with the FBI, working with Walter in the computer lab, because the computer lab was actually federally funded, and to the police precinct. And so Walter was kind of like that computer nerd of the '80s, where nobody liked him and stuff like that. Except for he did have a crush on Roxanne, and played by Heather McNair, and they also someone hinted that that was probably why Cursor always always hovered around the pretty blondes, because Walter had a crush on her. She was actually the only one I think who knew about Automan. To be honest with you, I don't think the detective knew, and I'd have to go
Well,
back and
the
watch all the episodes
detective
again.
probably didn't
But
care to know, and then yeah,
probably
and then
not. But the other one,
but like
what's
also at the
that?
same time, the detective, like the boss guy was weird. Like how he's getting so angry with him. I was like, he was like, "Hey, let's do this," and he's like, "Get out of here now!"
Like
Like, oh, okay, yeah, I know
stereotypical
exactly.
angry
Like the
police captain.
stereotypical I'm like asshole boss or some shit. And like,
Well, again, that's where I said it
It's
mimics superhero things, because that reminded me of Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man,
yeah,
and where the boss was always a dick, you know, you know. So the only difference, like I said, was the fact that it technically wasn't him that was the superhero in this case. He like designed him.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like
he
weird
created
science
a.
it up.
I Yeah, where they created. Yeah, that's another thing from the '80s where computers could do everything. They could make hot women look like Kelly LeBrock, and she can grant
Totally fine
wishes.
for that anyway.
So that's another one of those things that was stereotypical from the '80s. Um, Actually, my thoughts after watching some of the show, like I honestly feel like this is something I was going to love anyway, because I like cheesy stuff like this, and it was every bit as cheesy and hokey as I thought it would be. But honestly, I thought that that was okay. It's kind of reflective of the times. I heard someone say this about Knight Rider, and I think it holds true for Automan. They said that it was like the Vietnam War was ending, so people were looking for a little bit things that were less serious than before, less cold, so something a little bit more. I don't want to say campy, but right now, a lack of a better word escapes me. But people were wanting stuff like that. I really feel like this show had all the charm of Knight Rider, and I think if it had been given a longer chance, I do believe that we would have the same nostalgic feelings as a lot of us do for Knight Rider does today, because I feel like it's in the very same vein. Obviously, it has some similarities to me anyway, style wise, because it was created by Glenn Larson. But I got a very Knight Rider vibe from it, like I said, this kind of equates to your Hulk thing, where like Knight Rider had his formula. Michael Knight meets someone, he has to help them, he has to get out of the sticky situation, he has the supercar. It's kind of the same thing. Walter has the case to solve. He can't do it without his supercomputer Automan, who has a supercar or super tools, I should say, because he has a copter and a plane. Which
But he still has to hook up
I
to a
really feel
modem
like
every
if it had
once
been
in a
given,
while.
yeah, he has to dial
Hey,
in from a
Hal, can you go
modem.
get that damn
God, can
modem,
you
buzz?
imagine what the bar rate was
The
back?
Glenn
modem,
Larson
buzz.
liked making these type of shows, didn't he? Because he made, is that Manimal,
He
where
did.
a man who could change himself into an animal fights crime.
I think he did Manimal. He did. I thought I heard something where he was talking about the $6 million man, but I don't know if Glenn Larson had a hand in that. I didn't research it any further because we were just talking about Automan. But he actually, when he created Battlestar in the '70s, he actually he loved sci-fi, because of Star Wars led to Battlestar Galactica. But he actually the reason that Battlestar Galactica is the way it is Glenn Larson was like super into the Mormon faith, like that was his faith, and so he added a lot of Mormon stuff and into the mythos that is Battlestar Galactica. But he kind of had like a weird niche and stuff. I mean, Knight Rider is technically another show that we could talk about, even though it's not an unknown show, but it still falls into that sci-fi category
Yeah, and
because it deals with a
honestly,
supercar, and
I'm so
like a
surprised,
police
that they
procedural.
haven't tried to remake it already. That they've been trying to remake all these other sci-fi
I would
shows and shit.
I would love to see a new Automan, but it obviously would have to be a
And
little
they
bit
should
different.
change the name of
To
Automan.
be honest with you, I mean, it would have. They probably would. I really think that it was a good show. I do wish it had gotten more than 13 episodes. You can actually buy this show on
Wow.
DVD, and this is hashtag not sponsored. The DVD for Automan is available at Shout Factory's website. And so so if anyone's interested, that's where you can find it. It's got some bonus features. I think the DVD or not DVD, the documentary I found on YouTube, I think that's on the DVD set too. And it's actually pretty interesting because you could tell that this cast actually really loved making this show and they actually all got along. They all had nothing but like you could tell when they were talking about this show, when you see
Yeah.
people talk about something they really cared about, they have like the fondness, you can hear it in their voice. And you can actually really hear this in their voices. Like Desi Arnaz Jr. And Chuck Wagner got along great. They loved working with
Well,
each other. They had a natural chemistry, and no one said bad about. They all loved working on the show.
for
At least the
Desi
people they
Arnaz
interviewed.
Jr., what
I
else
don't
has
know.
he done other than this show? Did he do a whole lot of stuff?
He was. I don't know if he. I didn't really follow him to be honest with you. Like I didn't look up his IMDb. Well, I did, but I didn't make any notes because I didn't think we'd. I wasn't planning on discussing the actors. I know Chuck Wagner's done a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I think he had just come off a soap opera when he got Automan. Desi Arnaz was filming a movie, but I can't remember the name of the movie. But I mean, they've done stuff. He's still, he's still
Yeah.
out there doing things. But I mean, he's,
Well, I didn't
I'm
even
sure he's
know
doing something
until
entertainment. He's
I didn't
the
even
son
know
of Desi
that their kid
Arnaz.
like even did anything until like after you were talking about this show. I was just like, what?
I Yeah, I always wondered too, because I mean, they showed he's still doing stuff.
Oh,
Let me
Desi
take a
Arnaz
minute. I'm gonna
was
look him up real
one
quick,
of
see
the
if he's anything
characters
that.
on Automan too. I didn't realize that on the show. I think it might have been the second episode when they were doing.
I'd have to go back and look at
Yeah,
that because
well,
I
the
tried to
second
find trivia
episode
about
that
the
I
show
watched, it was the
the
one
show
where it was like
itself.
the mobsters and the judge was trying to trying to steal money from the mob. I guess one of the characters was Desi Arnaz,
Yeah,
one of
that
the
was the.
bad guys.
I'd have to go back and watch it because I didn't pay attention to like the special guests, and that's a fault on my part. But looking through his filmography, it looks like Desi Arnaz Jr. was in an episode of The Mod
Oh
Squad,
yeah, I
an
was just
episode of Night Gallery.
Googling his shit too.
He was in an episode of Brady Bunch. Nothing that we would have watched except for some of the TV stuff. He was in two episodes of Police Story, which I think I've heard of that show, but obviously I've never seen it.
Oh yeah, it looks
Most of the
like
stuff that he
mostly a
was
lot
in
of
two
like
episodes of The
TV
Love Boat,
shows that he was
the
trying to
original
get
Love Boat.
into.
Yeah, he's done a lot of day stuff like in TV shows, and
Well, somebody broke it.
Oops.
no, that's called a cat knocking over my
geez.
cup. Um, but that's okay. I'll get it cleaned up here in a second. She was trying to walk across the tablet, and I had to stop her. And so, but he's done a lot of bit stuff, and nothing like grandiose, like nothing
Yeah.
like big major roles or anything
Well,
like that.
being in the
Chuck
shadow of somebody,
Wagner's kind of done. Like,
ends it happen. Yeah.
yeah, it must be hard, but I thought it was a great show. I do recommend it to anyone who's never seen it. I say give it a go. I feel like this is something that like you would see on like I don't know if you all follow her, but like movie nights with Alison Pregler.
No.
She used to be Obscurus Lupa. No, I feel like this is something that she would be into. But it's actually a good show if you like quirky stuff, and so I do recommend checking it out. And so, does anyone have any other thoughts they'd like to offer?
I don't have any.
I mean,
all right. If there's nothing else, I do want to thank you all for joining me on Sci-Fi Graveyard. I do hope we get to do this again soon. I am thinking about episode number 2. It is a movie that was an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 in its Sci-Fi Channel years. It's called Space Mutiny. I actually have the movie Unriffed that I purchased a few years
Don't you
ago
mean
on Amazon.
episode 3?
So,
Didn't we?
well,
What was the
episode 2
Didn't
of
we do the
Sci-Fi
first one
Graveyard.
on?
No. Yeah. Yeah.
That
Steven's
was Plot Holes.
Oh,
That was Steven's
jeez,
podcast.
I'm sorry.
That's, so, on episode 2 of Sci-Fi Graveyard, I'm thinking. So when we get together to do this again, given circumstances, it's most likely going to be Space Mutiny. So we'll have to get together and watch that, and the Unriffed version, because you do have to see it in its entire cheesiness.
Oh.
But if that's it, thank you all for listening.
Never mind. We'll talk
What's that?
about it afterwards. Yeah.
All right. If there's nothing else, I thank you all for joining us on Sci-Fi Graveyard. I'm Elvin, and for Josh and Jeremy, thank you for listening. And if you like this, please subscribe. Check out our website, theheartofgeek.com. It's still under construction, but you'll find all our podcasts there. And also check us out on Facebook, The Heart of Geek, and on Twitter, @The Heart of Geek. So thank you all. Good night, and thank you for listening.